She betrayed me, so I ruined her wedding night. I never thought my life would fall apart on a Tuesday night at 2:30 a.m. But that's when I heard it. The soft giggle that didn't belong to me. The low murmur of a voice I knew but never expected to hear behind my bedroom door. Let me back up. My name's Nathan. I'm 29. For most of my life, I was the quiet, dependable guy. The one people come to for help moving, for advice, for moral support. I wasn't flashy, but I was steady. And I thought I'd won the lottery when I met Lauren. We met at a volunteer event back in college. She was radiant light brown hair, that open, sunshine smile that made you feel like you mattered. We hit it off instantly. She said I made her feel safe. I said she made me feel alive. 5 years later, we were engaged, planning a vineyard wedding, talking about kids. She even named the puppy we hadn't adopted yet. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. The first red flag was too subtle for a guy like me to see. She started staying late at work, but the texts slowed. The goodnight calls turned into sorry. I fell asleep. I made excuses for her. She's tired. She's busy. She still loves me. The second red flag was named Jake, my best friend since high school. We'd grown up on the same block, played on the same basketball team. He'd even been my best man in our mock wedding rehearsal. I trusted him like a brother, and that was my mistake. One night, I came home from a canceled work trip. I wanted to surprise Lauren with her favorite Thai food and maybe some dumb inside jokes. But I walked into something else. The house was dark, but I saw the soft glow of the bedroom light under the door. I smiled, quietly tiptoed in, thought I'd playfully jump on the bed and scare her. But the door was cracked open, and what I heard stopped everything in me. Lauren's voice. I can't wait till it's just us. Then Jake's. After the wedding, we'll figure it out. I didn't burst in. I didn't shout. I slowly backed away, each step heavier than the last. I drove around aimlessly for hours. My food got cold in the passenger seat, and my entire world burned down in my chest. You know that feeling where your stomach drops, but your mind's still pretending it didn't hear what it did. I kept telling myself I misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. But I knew. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I smiled, like everything was okay. I kissed Lauren on the forehead. I texted Jake, game night this weekend? And I started collecting screenshots. Her messages when she forgot to delete them from our shared laptop. Phone records. One night, she left her iPad unlocked. I took photos of everything. I hired a private investigator just to be sure, and when he handed me the file, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. The next month felt like a nightmare. I couldn't wake up from. We tasted cakes, picked flowers, posed for engagement photos I'll never post. I acted like the perfect fiancé. Like I didn't already know every time she worked late was a lie. People always say revenge is bitter, that it won't make you feel better. They're wrong. It made me feel alive again. The wedding day arrived. Golden sunlight, rows of white chairs lined with orchids, soft music playing from a harpist she insisted we hire. I stood at the altar in a tailored navy suit, heart steady, breathing calm. Jake was in the second row, beaming like nothing was wrong. He even winked at me. Lauren walked down the aisle. Everyone turned to look at her like she was a princess. But all I saw was a stranger, a liar in lace. She reached the altar, took my hand. The officiant began, "Do you, Nathan, take Lauren to be your lawfully wedded wife?" I looked around. I saw our families. My mom teary-eyed, her dad holding a camcorder, Jake smiling. Then I looked at Lauren. She smiled, expecting I do. I said, no gasps, confusion. Some people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Lauren blinked. What? I said no. I said clearly, pulling my hand away. Because you've been cheating on me with him. I pointed to Jake. For months. And I have the receipts. Check your phones. Phones buzzed. Murmurs turned into chaos. Her cousin gasped. Her maid of honor covered her mouth. Jake turned red and stood up. I can explain. I held up my hand. Sit down, Jake. You've done enough. Lauren grabbed my sleeve. Nathan, please, this is exactly the place. I wanted you both to be exposed, not just in the dark, but under God and your entire family. I handed the officiant a sealed envelope. Inside was everything: the investigator's report, a flash drive with recordings, and a check covering every expense. Because I wasn't going to let them say I ruined anything. I paid for it all. Then I turned around and I walked away. They tried to contact me for weeks. Calls, emails, begging for a second chance. Jake even had the audacity to ask if we could talk it out like men. I blocked them both. I moved cities, focused on myself, started my own creative agency. It's thriving. I met people who value honesty, people who remind me that trust isn't weakness, it's a gift you give once. And Lauren, last I heard, she moved back in with her parents. Jake lost his job. Apparently, karma arrived to their lives too. Sometimes revenge isn't about rage, it's about peace. It's about looking in the mirror and knowing you stood up for yourself with dignity. That you burned the bridge they lit first, but you walked away without a scratch. And that's the kind of revenge no one ever forgets. My name is Vivian Mercer. I'm 68 years old, and 3 months ago, I came within inches of dying, not from illness, not from accident, but from a cup of coffee laced with poison. A cup my daughter-in-law handed to me. A cup I almost drank. But the real betrayal? It wasn't just the poison. It was the person standing beside her, watching silent, cold. My only son, Julian. People say you can't choose your family. Maybe that's true. But I never thought the same child I once held in my arms would one day look me in the eye and quietly hope I wouldn't survive the morning. This isn't a story about wealth, though there's plenty of that. It's not just about betrayal, though. That runs deep. This is a story about survival, about instincts, about refusing to die quietly when the people closest to you decide you're worth more dead than alive. And if you're thinking this sounds like something out of a movie, I wish you were right. But everything I'm about to share happened, piece by painful piece, and it all began on a Tuesday morning, with a familiar sound in the driveway and a knock I'll never forget. I live alone on a 50-acre estate in rural Virginia. Ashwood, that's what my late husband Robert named it. The house sits on land rich with natural gas and rare earth minerals, inherited through generations of hard work and harder luck. We were never flashy people, but the fortune was real. And so were the vultures it attracted. The estate itself is quiet now, grand, but empty. Since Robert passed 5 years ago, the silence has grown louder, and the weight of keeping the legacy alive has fallen entirely on my shoulders. 14 rooms, crystal chandeliers, hand-carved furniture. None of it matters when you're the last one walking the halls. For decades, I worked as a prosecutor, 25 years of looking criminals in the eye and listening for lies. That job teaches you things. You start to hear the small cracks in people's voices. You start to notice what doesn't get said. I never imagined I'd have to use that experience on my own family, but I should have known. Money doesn't just change strangers. Sometimes it sharpens the hunger in the people you love most. It whispers promises to them at night, and if you're not careful, it teaches them to look at you not as blood, but as an obstacle. That Tuesday morning, I was in my study reviewing quarterly earnings when I heard the familiar hum of Julian's car, a sleek black BMW. The sound used to make me smile. Now it made me anxious. He rarely came unannounced, and never without a reason. Julian Mercer was always the kind of man people noticed, tall, clean-cut, with the kind of charisma that got him into Ivy League schools and investor meetings without ever really earning it. He had charm, yes, but charm doesn't build anything, and charm fades fast when failure becomes a pattern. He stepped out of the car that morning looking worn, not physically, but in spirit. His tailored suit was wrinkled, hair a little unkempt. His eyes carried that restless energy I'd seen before, desperation trying to dress itself up as confidence. "Mom," he said, walking straight into my study without knocking. "We need to talk." He sat down across from me, hands trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it. I put down my reading glasses and studied his face. Something was different this time. Not just urgency, fear. "I need money," he said flatly. 100,000. There it was. Julian had pitched me many ventures before. A boutique app for rating luxury spas, A vegan snack line that never made it past the packaging stage. Every idea full of buzzwords. Every failure dressed up in excuses. Each time, I gave in hoping he'd finally make it. Hoping he'd grow into something stable. Something real. But this time felt different. Sharper. Colder. He wasn't asking. He was informing. What's the venture this time? I asked. A marketing platform, he said, launching into a rehearsed pitch about tech partners and projections. It sounded slick. Too slick. I interrupted. Who's your partner? You don't know him. He's from California, Julian said, eyes flickering away. What's his name? He hesitated. Mom, that's not important. What matters is the opportunity. That moment told me everything. He was lying. I'd spent decades watching liars spin stories in courtrooms, and now my own son was spinning one right in front of me. And just like the defendants I once questioned, Julian was hiding something big. And this time, it wasn't just about money. It was about survival. His or mine. 2 days later, Julian returned. But he didn't come alone. His wife, Samantha or Sam, as she liked to be called, arrived with him, impeccably dressed as always. Cream-colored designer dress, flawless makeup, and the kind of posture that made every movement feel like a performance. I hope you don't mind us dropping by, she said with a practiced smile, stepping into my kitchen like she owned it. We brought coffee. She handed me a delicate china cup. It's a special blend Ethiopian beans with a touch of Madagascar vanilla. I thought you'd enjoy something new. The moment the aroma hit my nose, something in me pulled back. It smelled wrong, not spoiled, not rancid, but sharp like almonds, and beneath that, a sterile bitterness. After 3 decades of courtroom experience, I didn't need scientific proof. My body told me first. Something about this was off. I looked up, and Sam was watching me. Not casually, closely. Like a hunter watching prey approach a snare, Julian lingered in the doorway, unusually quiet. He avoided my eyes, kept fiddling with his phone, his usual restless charm replaced with something darker, like guilt wrapped in stillness. And in that moment, I made a decision that would save my life. While Sam turned to speak to Julian, I switched. Our cups, identical mugs, smooth white porcelain. It took less than 2 seconds. When she turned back, I raised the new cup and smiled. This is lovely. You'll have to show me the shop sometime. Sam took a sip from her own, my original, and I waited. 15 minutes later, the coughing began. At first, just a soft clearing of the throat. Then, it escalated. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her breathing became shallow and strained. Something's wrong, she gasped. Julian rushed to her side, full of concern. To perfectly time to feel real. As they scrambled to get her to the hospital, one thought echoed in my mind. That poison was meant for me. Boyfriend of 5 years cheated on me, so I ruined his precious RuneScape account. Me boyfriend and I had met online well over 6 years ago through an online game by the name of RuneScape. He was 14 and I was 17, but it had felt like we had been friends forever. We both played the game very often and connected through it, eventually leading us to start a long-distance relationship. Things began to escalate as the years went on, and we began seeing each other in person every few months or so. We were about 1,500 miles apart, so one of our main priorities for the future was moving in together and closing the distance. My job had prevented us from doing that, but we had finally set a date for me to move in with him in December of this year. Our relationship never had any serious issues, and I was more than happy to have him in my life as he was happy to have me. As I got older, I began to play RuneScape less and less, as work took up most of my time. He continued to play regularly, if not more than he had when I first met him. He could never really hold down a job and barely had an income, but I supported him throughout the years and even paid his rent from across the country after he moved out of his parents' house a few years ago. I never really minded it because he was a sweetheart, but we began to have problems. In November of last year, I couldn't help pay his monthly rent. I was short on cash after having to pay my own living expenses alongside car repairs and bills I owed to the state, and I just couldn't afford to support him at the time. When I called him one night to discuss it, He freaked out and started crying that he didn't want to live with his parents again. I tried calming him down and even suggesting that I could help him find a temporary job until I could start providing for him again, but he wasn't having it. He claimed his parents would abuse him if he returned home, which I know for a fact isn't true because him and his parents have stayed with me several times. They've given him the world. I eventually did calm him down, but he remained passive-aggressive the entire night, and we eventually hung up because I cared about him. I reached out to his father the next day and informed him that he would probably be moving back home after his lease expired that month. I explained how I wouldn't be able to afford paying for his living for a month or two, and if there were any local jobs he could work in order to, make an income. Apparently, a friend of his father needed help managing a small warehouse for his business and was looking to potentially hire my boyfriend for the season. It paid 15 her and was super easy, lifting boxes, sweeping the floors, and taking inventory. I brought it up to my boyfriend that same night and he was not having it. Not only did he not want to work in a shitty warehouse, but he didn't want to work at all. All he planned to do day in, day out was play RuneScape. I brought up a few other job listings I had found in his area and he immediately shot all of them down as well. He then had the audacity to comment about how he thinks I should work harder and possibly work a second job. I kept my composure and simply argued against it until we eventually hung up. I collapsed on my bed and cried for a good hour or two afterwards because of the intense emotional stress I was under. Not only do I work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, I'm also an industrial meteorologist. If I remember correctly, that's a lot more work than playing RuneScape every day and using my Hulu account. I really considered breaking up with him right that moment, but I changed my mind and decided to give him another chance. Looking back on it, big mistake. I messaged him throughout the night and we sort of made up, but I was still a little uneasy about the entire event. He had moved back with his parents by the time December had come, and I began to help him look for jobs while he wasted his life away playing video games. I eventually persuaded him to start working at a small retail store near his house, and he thankfully began to make some money. I would still buy him video games and transfer him money like normal because I spoiled him, and our relationship began to feel somewhat okay again. Last month, both him and I put our money together to fly him across the US to stay with me for 4 days. We hadn't seen each other in person since last summer, so we were both looking forward to it. He arrived and we had a great time for the first few days because he could actually take me on dates for once with his new income. Everything was perfect until I caught a glimpse of his phone's lock screen while he was taking a shower. "When are you gonna leave here?" the Discord message read. I could have ran into the bathroom and snapped his neck in that moment, but I kept myself together as best as I could without killing him. I had never felt so used, disrespected, or hated in my entire life. When he came out of the bathroom, I gave him a fake smile, but I genuinely hated him from that moment on. He could have dropped dead on the floor and I would have spit on him. I spent the remainder of the night watching him play RuneScape and I remained very quiet. He took notice of this and asked me if everything was okay, and I lied and told him I was fine. When it came time to go to sleep, I let that fucker climb into bed with me and he tried initiating sex because it was our final night together. I rejected as politely as I could without tearing his member completely off. He was disappointed, but went out like a light. Immediately after he went to sleep, I reached over and unplugged his phone and started digging through his messages with that girl. I feared that I had misinterpreted the message I had seen, but I was completely right. After all, not only had he been cheating on me, he had been doing so for nearly 6 months, leading me to believe that he hooked up with another girl directly after I couldn't pay for his living in November. I scrolled through probably 100,000 messages and wanted to vomit my insides out by the end of it. He had talked shit about me, claimed I was emotionally abusive just as he had done with his parents, and even sent this girl my nudes so they could pick me apart physically. When morning came, I had slept in because of how late I was up reading his messages. I woke up to find him on my computer playing RuneScape and eating my food. It was like all of our relationship had been wiped from my mind and he was now an evil stranger sitting in my house. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tear him apart. and kick him out of my house onto the street. But I didn't. In fact, I gave him as much love and attention as I could muster that morning because I wanted to leave things feeling normal between us. I dropped him off at the airport and we had a quick and somber goodbye before I left him forever. Unbeknownst to him, I drove back home as calmly as I could before crying my eyes out in a mix of complete anger and emotional pain. I ended up kicking my bed frame so hard that the wood split and I had to buy another one recently. If only it were his face. I wanted to break his heart by the time he arrived back home, but I wanted it to really hurt. I logged into our joint RuneScape account that we had made several years ago, where him and I would work on training the same account and raising it almost like our baby. We had always joked that if we were to ever split up, he would take half of the account's bank contents and I would take the rest. I took my half and transferred it to my main account before taking his half and giving it away to random people throughout the game. Every last bit of it, even items I couldn't normally trade away, I used a spell to convert the items into coins, which I then gave away as well. The bank was now empty. It then occurred to me that I had the credentials to his main account were written down in my desk, as he would frequently have me train his farming skill every so often. I didn't hesitate at all and logged into his precious 14-year-old RuneScape account. I immediately took all of the contents of his bank and sold it, all on the Grand Exchange, a marketplace in the game. It took an extremely long time to clear out his bank, but he would still be flying home for about another 4 hours, so I had plenty of time. By the time I had sold or destroyed everything, I had 4 stacks of coins totaling over 8.5 billion. Now, what to spend it on? I wanted to waste his life earnings on the most useless, stupid thing I could think of, besides him. I logged back into my main account to reach out to a friend of mine that collects massive stacks of burnt food. For the unaware, burnt food in RuneScape has no use. You can't unburn them, eat them, or even sell them on the Grand Exchange. They are, however, tradable amongst players. I've always poked fun at this guy for collecting burnt food, but I was now more thankful than ever to make his acquaintance in my revenge. I asked him what the most obscure unwanted item was of the burnt food variety was, and he replied burnt spider. Lo and behold, he had roughly 6,000 of the item spider on shaft burnt in his bank that he was willing to sell me. Feeling generous with my ex-boyfriend's coins, I gave my friend a full stack of 2.147 billion coins and left a very happy customer. I dropped the 6,083 burnt spiders in his bank, but still had about 6 billion coins left to spend. With the remaining money, I decided to treat myself. I went onto the Grand Exchange and ended up going on a shopping spree. The first thing I bought were 100 bonds. If you're not familiar, a bond in RuneScape grants you 14 days of in-game membership. After trading all 100 bonds to my account, I now have almost 4 years of membership paid for me. I spent a majority of his coins on extremely nice armor and weapons, all of which went straight into my account. He still had about an extra billion, so I spent it on the supplies I needed to level up an expensive skill of mine. By the end of the afternoon, he was left with a measly 150,000 coins in his bank, all of which I gave away to a guy cooking pizzas outside of the exchange. Nothing was left, so I decided to pick up a pile of bones off the ground and leave it solely in his bank. It might sound petty, but I laughed for a while. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is so cruel. You ruined the tens of thousands of hours he had put into a game. Well, it was time he learned that I can be a bitch, a mean bitch. On top of spending every last coin he had ever made, I leveled his defense skill. This may not sound bad. In fact, it sounds like a good thing. I helped his account progress, right? Well, no, unfortunately for my ex, he had what players commonly refer to as a pure account, meaning he never, ever dared to level his defense skill from level 1 in order to keep the lowest defense stats but have high offensive stats. Well, not anymore. Have fun with your permanent level 6 defense, cycling through hundreds of possible forms of revenge in my head. I settled on getting rid of his house. It's quite an achievement in RuneScape to have a nice house of your own. In fact, he had one of the nicest I had ever seen in the game. In order to have built it, He must have spent well over a few billion coins. Too bad I had disassembled it all in a matter of minutes, deleting it all into cyberspace. And there's no insurance either. He's going to have to rebuy everything with his non-existent money if he wants a new house. Bye-bye, Casa de Cheater. Scrolling through his friends list, I decided to act as him and pay a visit to his friends who were currently online and admit that I had cheated on my girlfriend and was fully proud of it. If his friends hadn't removed him by that point, I removed them, all of them. Lastly, to add a beautiful little cherry to this revenge-filled cake, I changed his username. You're able to change your username once a month on RuneScape, so I changed his to let everybody know that he's a dirty cheater. I obviously won't drop his username here, but I did the best I could to embarrass him with a 12-character limit. He should be able to reclaim his previous username in about 3 weeks, but if he waits too long, I'll be able to swipe it and slap it on a throwaway account of my own forever. He sent me a very hateful and aggressive message later that night, followed by pictures of him crying. I wrote him a sincere message officially ending the relationship, while also scaring him away by threatening to take him to court over sharing my nudes and possibly filing a cease and desist if he were to contact me anytime soon. I don't plan on doing any of that. I just don't want to speak to him ever again. And next to OOB, tell Dr. boyfriend of 5 years that I had financially supported for everything decided to cheat on me and spread my nudes. I wasted his RuneScape riches on 6,000 dead spiders and completely trashed his 14+ years of effort, leaving him with nothing to show for but a shameful username. Edit. Wow, I really didn't expect this to blow up as much as it did, lol. To clarify, this post is referring to old school RuneScape rather than RuneScape 3. We met playing our S3 but immediately put all of our focus into old school when it first released. He even transferred 90% of his RS3 worth over to old school through bots and such, making this revenge even sweeter. So while his old school account is only 6 years old, as is mine, his fortunes were the collective effort of a previous 8 years on RS3. Thank you so much for the Reddit gold. I don't know what to do with it, but I'm glad I've given you a revenge boner. Apple's insistence that I change my Apple ID password and extra contractual barrier nowhere found in the Apple Care Plus terms sparked a full-blown small claims firestorm. What began as a simple refusal to update my password ballooned into a three-curtain comedy of errors, with an unqualified store manager standing in for the most powerful tech company on the planet. In the end, I walked away with a $185 judgment garnished straight from Apple's own payroll account, proving that corporate pomposity can crumble under the weight of real justice. Apple's holier-than-thou attitude is their undoing in court. Few disclosures before we begin. I was an Apple retail employee for 2 years and amicably resigned in favor of full-time, post-college employment several months before this unfolded. Additionally, the central issue of this post seems minor. I didn't want to change my password, so some may find this more appropriate for R or petty revenge, but as it involves an extensive court battle, I think R or revenge is a better venue. Although the main issue may make me look petty, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Based on Apple's pompousness throughout the issue, about a year and a half ago, I was having issues with both my MacBook and iPhone, and scheduled a Genius Bar appointment. This used to be an easy task. You just went to the support site and booked one, but over time, Apple has foolishly attempted to reduce the Genius Bar workload by putting up various roadblocks. I assume this is cheaper than hiring more staff, and that most customers are loyal enough to endure the degraded service. After jumping through several hoops to finally get an appointment, I was prompted to enter my Apple ID and password. I was told that since it had been 3 months, I needed to change it for what was probably the 10th time. I could still use the ID for the App Store and iCloud, but to get a service appointment, I had to change the password. Having gone through this too many times, I finally hit my wit's end. I decided it was an unnecessary barrier to getting my products serviced and escalated the matter through the BBB. Apple's initial response to the BBB was a form letter saying I needed to change the password for security reasons and that there would be no exceptions. I responded, pointing out that this was poor customer service and contradicted the Apple credo that all employees are trained in. Their next reply? Apple considers this matter closed. I hate that response. It's corporate. Speak for you're not worth our time anymore. The BBB closed the case shortly afterward. I dug into my Apple Care Plus policies and discovered there was no clause allowing Apple to refuse service based on arbitrary account security policies. So, I filed a small claims suit seeking the replacement value of the laptop and phone. Here's where it got interesting. Court date arrives. I show up. Apple sends the store manager from the location where I used to work. The store is much farther from the courthouse than another Apple store a mile away. I suspect they just looked up my name and assumed this was a former employee grievance. The judge asks me to explain my case. I succinctly state that Apple is enforcing an extra contractual barrier to service and that I want replacement value for the devices. The judge then turns to the manager and asks if he's a lawyer. He isn't. The judge tells him only an executive or licensed attorney can represent a company in court. The manager, trying to defuse the situation, says he can set up a Genius Bar appointment for me right then and there. The judge deems that reasonable. I agree to visit my old store, and the case is continued for 2 weeks in case things fall through. I go to the appointment. My devices are fixed. A senior tech emails me and overrides the password expiration requirement on my Apple ID permanently. Cool, but I'm still out $60 in filing fees. At the continued hearing, a different judge, no nonsense type, is cutting through the docket. I explain I'm no longer seeking damages, but that I should be reimbursed the $60 in filing fees because Apple only complied after I sued. The judge turns to the store manager. Are you a lawyer? Same answer. The judge offers to split the difference to save time. I get 30 under my state's laws. The prevailing party is entitled to full court costs. I email Apple's paralegal, the one who had contacted me after the first hearing, and cite the law, requesting the remaining $30. Otherwise, I'd have to appeal, which would cost $125, and Apple would owe me $185 when they inevitably lost. They respond, "We will follow the court's judgment and pay $30. I suspect they thought I was bluffing. I wasn't. I appeal. Now we're in the county circuit court, the highest trial court. I show up. The same manager shows up again. The judge, Bodhi, lively demeanor, asks me to explain. I do. He turns to the manager and asks if he's a lawyer. The manager says no, but presents a letter from Apple's chief legal counsel stating that they're okay with him representing Apple. The judge's whole vibe changes. Apple does not decide what you can or cannot do in my courtroom. You need an attorney. He turns to me. Do you object to a continuance so Apple can get an attorney? I respond, yes, Your Honor. They've now been told 3 times to get a lawyer and continue to disrespect the court. The judge sarcastically and with a grin. Sorry. Judgment entered in my favor. 185, 30 days pass. No payment. I email the paralegal again. She says they're exploring options, as if they'll appeal to the state Supreme Court, but they forgot I used to work for them. I contact my credit union, look up an old payroll deposit, and ask where it came from. Answer, Wachovia. I file garnishment proceedings through that bank. No. Discovery phase needed since I already knew a source of funds. Wachovia cuts me a check within days. TL. Dr. Apple refused to service my products unless I change my Apple ID password, something not required in their Apple Care Plus terms. I sued them. They sent an unqualified manager to court 3 times instead of legal counsel. I won. They didn't pay. I garnished it out of their payroll account. Cancer nearly stole my life at 24, so I chose to remove both breasts, and when a jealous coworker mocked my implants and tried to weaponize my past to get me fired, I did not back down. I walked into HR with medical records, 16, signed witness statements, and a contract clause demanding an impartial review, and by the end of the day, she was the one packing her desk while I kept my job. Coworker tried to get me fired over breast implants, so I played my reverse no and got her fired instead 4 years ago, when I was just 24. Cancer shattered my world. My mom died of breast cancer that year, just like both my grandmothers before her. Grief wasn't new to me, but this time, It came with a warning. I decided to get screened, and the results sent a chill through my bones. My doctors found potentially cancerous cells in one of my breasts. Due to my family history, the risk wasn't just theoretical, it was practically a ticking time bomb. I was given three choices. 1. Regular screenings every few months until it became cancer, if it ever did. 2. A single mastectomy on the affected breast, plus ongoing monitoring on the other. 3. A bilateral mastectomy removing both breasts entirely and all but eliminating the risk. After watching cancer devastate my mom, I didn't hesitate. I went with the third option. I chose survival, but no one warned me about the scars. The surgery left me with deep, jagged reminders of what I'd lost, two angry pink slashes that made me feel like a Frankenstein version of myself. I threw away my mirrors. I stopped leaving the flat. My reflection made me physically sick. It wasn't just my body that had been altered, it was my identity. Therapy helped a bit, but even my therapist eventually admitted that maybe, in my case, cosmetic surgery wasn't vanity, it was healing. I tried creams. I researched laser treatments. Eventually, I went to a plastic surgeon who offered implants as an option to both restore my shape and cover the scars. So I did it. I went from my natural F cup down to a DD, and with it came something I hadn't felt in years: relief. I could wear clothes again without crying. I could look in the mirror and see me, not trauma. My mental health improved drastically. Fast forward to present day. I'm 28 and working in a fairly normal office job. My co-workers didn't know much about my past, and I liked it that way. But that peace was short-lived because of Jill. It started with a harmless joke. An old friend of mine from before my surgery and I were planning a holiday, and she made a dumb comment about me floating on the plane with those things. Jill overheard, and by the end of the day, everyone in the office knew I'd had a boob job, but they didn't know why. From there, it got toxic fast. Jill made snide comments weekly, sometimes daily. Plastic Barbie, sack of silicone, and fake in more ways than one were just a few of her greatest hits. I asked her for times to stop, but always in private areas like the women's bathroom or the lift, places with no cameras and no witnesses. And she never did. It wasn't just mean, it was relentless. It felt like I was being stripped naked in front of everyone. My most vulnerable experience turned into office gossip. The final straw came at lunch one day. We were with a few co-workers casually chatting when I made a passing comment about something being shallow. Without missing a beat, Jill gestured to my chest and smirked. "You'd know all about being shallow." Something in me snapped. I put down my fork, looked her dead in the eye, and calmly said, "Do you know why I have these?" I had potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I watched cancer kill my mother and both grandmothers. I chose to remove both breasts to save my life. The scars that surgery left were so horrific I couldn't look at myself without breaking down. So yes, I got implants not for attention, but because I wanted to be able to live and to recognize myself when I looked in the mirror. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for getting surgery, you should ask why first. I picked up my lunch and walked out. That should have been the end of it. But Jill ran straight to HR. The next day, I got an email from HR about a complaint regarding a hostile work environment. And I knew Debbie from HR, Jill's best friend, was behind it. If Jill was trying to get me fired, I wasn't going down without a fight. I remembered a clause in my contract, something about requesting a different HR rep if I had reason to believe my assigned reviewer was biased. I found it, printed it, and highlighted it. Then I got to work. I reached out to the co-workers who'd offered support after the lunchroom incident. I asked if they'd be willing to write signed statements detailing the things Jill had said. 16 people said yes. Some even included bullet points of every insult Jill had slung toward me, and others, anti-Semitic remarks, body shaming, mocking someone's disability. Jill had apparently been equal opportunity awful. The next morning, I walked into HR prepared. When Debbie called me into the meeting, I turned to the other HR rep and said, "Is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I pulled out the highlighted contract. "I'm requesting an impartial overseer, as per my contract." I'm aware the person who reported me is a close personal friend of yours. Debbie tried to protest. I stood my ground. Eventually, a supervisor got involved. I calmly handed over my folder copies of medical records which HR already had permission to view, signed statements from 16 colleagues, the timeline of my complaints, and a list of witnesses from the lunchroom incident. They grilled me for half an hour, asking the same questions in different ways. I answered every single one with receipts, timelines, and names. I laid it all out. Jill's harassment, her obsession with my body, and her public shaming of me for a surgery that saved my sanity after almost losing my life. Then I went back to my desk, heart pounding. I figured I'd just bought myself a bit of time before they asked me to pack my things, but then HR started calling people in. First the lunch witnesses, then everyone who had written a statement. They were gone for 10-15 minutes each. Then finally, Jill got called in. She came back red-faced and fuming. She threw daggers at me with her eyes. An hour later, she was called in again. At 2 p.m. Jill came storming back into the office. She started packing her things in a rage, muttering that I'd got her fired and ranting to anyone who would listen. I didn't say a word. Just then, an email from HR landed in my inbox. Your case is closed. No further action was being taken. I kept my job. Jill lost hers. And while people keep telling me this wasn't a real reverse no card, I'd argue this was the best play I've ever made. Moral of the story: don't mess with people just because you don't know their pain. And if you decide to harass someone in the workplace, maybe don't pick the one who's organized enough to bring receipts, witnesses, and a legal clause to the table just to serve implants of edmisty reversuneron toward. She betrayed me, so I ruined her wedding night. I never thought my life would fall apart on a Tuesday night at 2:30 a.m. But that's when I heard it. The soft giggle that didn't belong to me. The low murmur of a voice I knew but never expected to hear behind my bedroom door. Let me back up. My name's Nathan. I'm 29. For most of my life, I was the quiet, dependable guy. The one people come to for help moving, for advice, for moral support. I wasn't flashy, but I was steady, and I thought I'd won the lottery when I met Lauren. We met at a volunteer event back in college. She was radiant light brown hair, that open, sunshine smile that made you feel like you mattered. We hit it off instantly. She said I made her feel safe. I said she made me feel alive. 5 years later, we were engaged, planning a vineyard wedding, talking about kids. She even named the puppy we hadn't adopted yet. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. The first red flag was too subtle for a guy like me to see. She started staying late at work, but the texts slowed. The goodnight calls turned into sorry. I fell asleep. I made excuses for her. She's tired. She's busy. She still loves me. The second red flag was named Jake, my best friend since high school. We'd grown up on the same block, played on the same basketball team. He'd even been my best man in our mock wedding rehearsal. I trusted him like a brother, and that was my mistake. One night, I came home from a canceled work trip. I wanted to surprise Lauren with her favorite Thai food and maybe some dumb inside jokes. But I walked into something else. The house was dark, but I saw the soft glow of the bedroom light under the door. I smiled, quietly tiptoed in, thought I'd playfully jump on the bed and scare her. But the door was cracked open, and what I heard stopped everything in me. Lauren's voice. I can't wait till it's just us. Then Jake's. After the wedding, we'll figure it out. I didn't burst in. I didn't shout. I slowly backed away, each step heavier than the last. I drove around aimlessly for hours. My food got cold in the passenger seat, and my entire world burned down in my chest. You know that feeling where your stomach drops, but your mind's still pretending it didn't hear what it did. I kept telling myself I misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. But I knew. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I smiled, like everything was okay. I kissed Lauren on the forehead. I texted Jake, game night this weekend? And I started collecting screenshots. Her messages when she forgot to delete them from our shared laptop. Phone records. One night, She left her iPad unlocked. I took photos of everything. I hired a private investigator just to be sure, and when he handed me the file, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. The next month felt like a nightmare. I couldn't wake up from. We tasted cakes, picked flowers, posed for engagement photos I'll never post. I acted like the perfect fiancé. Like I didn't already know every time she worked late was a lie. People always say revenge is bitter, that it won't make you feel better. They're wrong. It made me feel alive again. The wedding day arrived. Golden sunlight, rows of white chairs lined with orchids, soft music playing from a harpist she insisted we hire. I stood at the altar in a tailored navy suit, heart steady, breathing calm. Jake was in the second row, beaming like nothing was wrong. He even winked at me. Lauren walked down the aisle. Everyone turned to look at her like she was a princess. But all I saw was a stranger, a liar in lace. She reached the altar, took my hand. The officiant began, "Do you, Nathan, take Lauren to be your lawfully wedded wife?" I looked around. I saw our families. My mom teary-eyed, her dad holding a camcorder, Jake smiling. Then I looked at Lauren. She smiled, expecting I do. I said, "No." Gasps, confusion. Some people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Lauren blinked. "What?" I said no. I said clearly, pulling my hand away. "Because you've been cheating on me with him." I pointed to Jake. "For months. And I have the receipts. Check your phones." Phones buzzed. Murmurs turned into chaos. Her cousin gasped. Her maid of honor covered her mouth. Jake turned red and stood up. "I can explain." I held up my hand. "Sit down, Jake. You've done enough." Lauren grabbed my sleeve. "Nathan, please, this is exactly the place. I wanted you both to be exposed, not just in the dark, but under God and your entire family." I handed the officiant a sealed envelope. Inside was everything: the investigator's report, a flash drive with recordings, and a check covering every expense. Because I wasn't going to let them say I ruined anything. I paid for it all. Then I turned around and I walked away. They tried to contact me for weeks. Calls, emails, begging for a second chance. Jake even had the audacity to ask if we could talk it out like men. I blocked them both. I moved cities, focused on myself, started my own creative agency. It's thriving. I met people who value honesty, people who remind me that trust isn't weakness, it's a gift you give once. And Lauren, last I heard, she moved back in with her parents. Jake lost his job. Apparently, karma arrived to their lives too. Sometimes revenge isn't about rage. It's about peace. It's about looking in the mirror and knowing you stood up for yourself with dignity. That you burned the bridge they lit first, but you walked away without a scratch. And that's the kind of revenge no one ever forgets.